Good day everyone, I am Mary Patricia Tria from BSN 14 and today I am going to perform the medical hand washing technique. As we all know, proper hand washing and hand hygiene is the most important preliminary and final step in every nursing and medical procedure since it prevents the growth and spread of pathogenic microorganisms. So before we start with the procedure, let us first make sure that all of the materials are already prepared. So right here, I have a sink with a faucet that is handheld operated. And let us make sure that there is a running water. And then I have here a liquid soap that is antibacterial or antimicrobial. And then I have a paper towel to dry our hands later. And right down here, I have a trash bin or trash can for the disposal of paper towels. So before we start with the procedure, let us first prepare and assess our hands. First of all, let us remove any jewelries since jewelries could harbor microorganisms due to the spaces on its surfaces. So right now, since I don't have any jewelries, I don't have watch, I don't have any ring, or I don't have any bracelet, then therefore I am good to go. After that, let us also assess or ensure that our nails are short because longer nails means that it could harbor a lot of microorganisms because having a longer nails means providing a room for the microorganisms to hide. So since I don't have a long nails, I have a short nails, then therefore there is no room for the microorganisms to hide in my nails. Lastly, let us assure or let us assess that there is no presence of any cuts or wounds in our hands. Because if there are presence of cuts or wounds, it means that there is possibility that there is high concentration of microorganisms in those locations. And if ever we have cuts or wounds, then therefore we should wear gloves in every procedure that we will make. So right now, since I don't have any cuts or wounds, then it is already okay. Since my hands are not soiled or not very dirty, then therefore, it is not required for me to perform longer hand hygiene. Because if ever our hands are too much soiled or very dirty, then therefore, it requires us to perform hand hygiene for a longer period of time. So right now, to start the procedure, first let us stand in front of the sink, making sure that our uniform and our hands does not touch the surface of the sink as well the inside of the sink. Because the inside and the surface of the sink are all considered as contaminated. And if ever our uniform or our hands touches the surface of the sink or the inside of the sink, then therefore our hands and uniform are already considered as contaminated. After then, we have to turn on the faucet to let the water running down the sink. So right now, it is important to first rinse the sink through the running water just to flush away all the present microorganisms in the sink. Moreover, it is also important to remember to avoid any splashing of the water from the sink because if ever that water splashes in our uniform, then our uniform are considered contaminated because anything or any water that came from the sink is already contaminated. And then after that, we should also regulate the temperature of the faucet. But since my faucet here is not automated or does not modify the temperature, then therefore, I am just using a tap water. Because it is important to remember not to use warm water because it removes the protective oil in our skin and not to use cold water since it does not facilitate or it does not help in the removal of microorganisms. So right now, I'm just using a tap water. After then, we will start to wet our hands. So in wetting our hands, we will first wet our wrist down to our fingers because we are following the aseptic principle or the aseptic technique where we are starting from the least contaminated to the most contaminated. So right now, I am already wetting my hands. And we must remember to always hold our hand lower than our elbows to avoid the travel of the water from our hands to our elbows. So when my hands are already wet, just to make sure that all of those are already wet from the running water, because it also helps in the removal of the microorganisms through the pressure from the running water. When my hands are already wet, I will now add a liquid soap, which is about 3 to 5 ml, or considered as 1 teaspoon of liquid soap. So right now, we will start with rubbing our hands just to create a lather, perfect lather to cover all of the surfaces, because soap helps in removing the present microorganism in our hands, because it emulsifies fats and oils and lower the surface tension. After then, I will start with the first step, which is rubbing our hands from palm to palm within 15 to 30 seconds. But the required time period depends on the degree of contamination of our hands. So right now, I am just rubbing from 15 to 30 seconds just to create lather and to create friction against my hands, because that friction mechanically removes all the microorganisms. After then, I will already proceed to the next step, which is my left palm over the right dorsum of my hands. In that way, I can also rub the back of my hands just to make sure that all of the surface are covered in the hand washing. We should also remember to keep our fingers down just to make sure that the water or the soap does not travel to our elbow, because if that happens, then therefore the contamination will travel from our hands to our elbows. Then after that, I will proceed to the right dorsum through the left palm. So my left palm is under my right dorsum. I am now rubbing the right dorsum of my hand. So you have to rub it vigorously just to make sure all the microorganisms present there would be removed. After that, we will now rub our hands from palm to palm, but our fingers are interlaced. In that way, we can rub the surfaces between our fingers or digits, because most of the time, microorganisms hide in those spaces here. So therefore, we must rub it with enough friction just to make sure that these microorganisms will be removed. Again, around 15 to 30 seconds. After that, we will now proceed to the back of our fingers. The back of our fingers through our opposite palm. Again, with the fingers interlaced. So we must perform that 15 to 30 seconds. As you can see, I am still making sure my hands are below my elbow. So after the dorsum or the back of the fingers of my left hand, I will now proceed to the dorsum or the back of the fingers of my right hand. Okay, around 15 to 30 seconds again to make sure all of these microorganisms will be removed. After that, we will now proceed to the next step, which is rubbing our thumb. So in rubbing our thumb, we must use the opposite palm, and we must rub it with the clasped palm rotationally or circular movement. We must make sure that the surface here would be rubbed, because again, all of the microorganisms hides in those hidden surfaces. Okay, around 15 to 30 seconds. And then, we will rub to the opposite thumb through the opposite palm that is clasped in a rotational movement. After that, we will now perform the next step, which is we will rub our nails through our palm, against our palm, in a rotational or back and forth movement. So as you can see, I have here my nails. I will rub it against my palm in a rotational first, okay? And then back and forth. So we could also include our knuckles just to make sure all of the surfaces are covered in the hand washing. Okay, 15 to 30 seconds. And then after that, I will now perform to the other side. The nails of my left hand against the right palm. So right now, I'm doing a rotational movement. And then back and forth. Okay? After that, we will now proceed to the last step, which is to rub our wrist. So we are just rubbing our wrist 1 inch above the wrist because our hands is not that soiled. But if ever we have soiled our arms up until here, then therefore we must rub or we must wash our arm until here, which is 1 inch above that contaminated area. So after our wrist, we will now rinse our hands. So how are we going to rinse our hands? We should still follow the aseptic principle or aseptic technique, in which we will start with our fingers going to our wrist. Because right now, it is considered that our fingers are the most clean and our wrists are the least clean. So we will start it with that. Just still making sure that our hands are lower than our elbows. You just let the rushing water or the flowing water, the running water to flow in your hands to remove all the soap present in your hands. Because running water, the pressure in the running water also helps in the removal of the present microorganisms. Make sure to always keep your hands lower than your elbows, just to avoid the travel of water from your hands to your elbows. So contamination would also be prevented. Okay, so once my hands is already rinsed, right now we will just let it drip for a while, and then we will get a paper towel. So once we get a paper towel, we will pat dry our hands from our fingers, and then up to our wrist. It is important again to start with our fingers, since we are following the aseptic technique, in which we will start with the most clean to the leanest or least clean, which is our wrist. After that, we will dispose this paper towel here under the sink where the trash bin or the trash can is located. So, to close the faucet, we are not using our bare hands, but instead we are going to use a paper towel. It is important to use another paper towel in closing the faucet because using that paper towel, which is the one that we use in drying our hands, means that we are enabling the transfer of microorganisms, because microorganisms travels in moist locations or moist environment. So if ever we use that paper towel, which is moist and somehow wet, when we turn off the faucet, then therefore microorganisms could travel from the faucet back to our hands again. Therefore, the main objective of our hand washing would be failed. So right now, we use this dry paper towel so we could avoid that to happen. And then we will now dispose this paper towel again down here in the sink where the trash bin or the trash can is located. So that's it. That's the medical hand washing technique. Again, I am Mary Patricia Tria from BSN 14 and thank you for watching.